Hi, this is Web3 Talks, the podcast where we learn how to build Web3 projects directly from Web3 founders. My name is Maciej Budkowski and I talk with the founders about their projects, business models, technology, community building, user acquisition strategies, and more. If you want to start your own project or are just curious about the space, this podcast will bring you answers. Stay tuned. Hello, Zakku. I'm very happy to have you on the pod. For those who don't know Zakku, he's a founder of Coordinape, a tool to recognize and reward DAO contributors. And it got pretty big this year, and I bet that last year, because 2022 just started, and I bet 2022 will be a huge year for them. But before we get to Coordinape, could you, Zakku, tell us a few words about your background in a crypto/Web3/blockchain space?
Sure. It's pretty short. So I've only been in the space for about a year. I sort of discovered it through Yearn, and I was friends with Tracheopteryx and saw what they were up to at Yearn and just kind of got really, really excited about DAOs. My previous work is I was a co-founder of a consultancy called Converge, and we brought together corporate and nonprofit and government leaders to address systemic issues. So how do you conserve 500,000 acres of redwoods? Or how do you protect migrant rights across borders? These large systemic issues that require many different people collaborating together. And so, how I often think about it now is we were building in real life DAOs. And so, one of our big challenges always was how do we scale this work? Because, we were bringing together people in these convenings, in the same room for 3 or 4 days and learning about decentralized decision-making and network leadership and all of these things that turned out to be kind of directly applicable to what was happening in the DAO space. So it was kind of late to the party, but when I discovered it, I just got really excited because it was sort of a way to scale the work we'd been doing for the past several years at Converge.
Wow, it seems like a perfect background to work in DAOs. And, I feel that maybe you've been late to the party, but I don't think you've been late to the DAO party. I think the last year was this crazy DAO explosion year, just an NFT year as well.
Yeah.
So
I sort of have watched it. It's sort of, I think, I'm just another person that kind of saw the potential and got really excited about the kind of coordination and collaboration that these structures allow. And a lot of us saw it at the same time and got excited, and DAOs blew up, and now it's on us to actually execute and sort of deliver on the promise that we all see.
Yeah, great. Before I get to the next question, I just want to say that it's pretty inspiring that, you've been in this space for a year only, because there are people who are for, 12 years or something. And you already started building. I know that many people, when they enter the space, they prefer to stand on the sidelines and just, I will spend a year or two just looking around. But it's super cool that you started building, and I'm inspired by that. So, you said that your origin story of Coordinape is, and yours as well, is related to Yearn Finance. So could you share the story behind the Coordinape and what's the main idea behind the product?
Zem and Tracheopteryx, who are the co-founders of co-founders of Coordinape, we've been talking for quite a while just about these different ideas of decentralization, and especially how do you tap into collective intelligence, right? How do you actually cohere and align and make the whole greater than the sum of its parts? And so we had been having these conversations, and Trake and Zem were both contributors at Yearn. And I sort of came in and saw wow, there's an actually decentralized organism that is functioning and even thriving. So we got excited about what was happening there. And one of the things that we saw was the monthly grants that Yearn was giving to all these different contributors, right? And there was essentially a grants committee, and people that were contributing to Yearn would apply for grant. And there were numerous challenges with this. One is that there was a small committee that was making these subjective decisions around, what grant should be rewarded, right? And how much? And what about this person who did all this stuff but didn't apply for a grant even? do we just give them a gift? What about this person who applied for a grant, but it's too much, so do we just give them half or do we reject it? And also, like, how did we end up on the grants committee? It was sort of just by default. The people that were there were making these decisions, but they were never, chosen to be there. And so it was just, it was kind of it was kind of satisfying to nobody, And so one of the threads that we followed was at my previous company, Converge, we never had anyone on payroll. The way that people got paid was we would do work for clients and invoice them, and then we would put that invoice in the middle of the table for all of the team members that had worked on it, and we would decide together through a conversation who should get paid what, based on what happened over the course of the project. And we did that for 8 years. We still do that today. That's how Converge works. There's no one draws a salary. Everything is based on a conversation. And so we started thinking, like, what if we could do that asynchronously? What if we could build a tool so that people can thank and compensate others based on the value that they saw being contributed? And so, the first epic of Coordinape was really, true to its use, testing in prod, which I feel like we still are, and hopefully always will be to some extent. Yeah, but it was really like, okay, let's just let the contributors reward each other. And that was, kind of the first circle. And really, Coordinape very organically grew out of that first prototype and other folks starting to say, hey, that looks cool. Can we use that? Can we try it? And, this was a common pain point for a lot of DAOs, especially on community contributions. And so we just kind of went from there.
Great. Could you expand for people who are not familiar with Coordinape, how does it work? So, for example, like I'm a contributor in a project, and how can I get rewarded for the stuff I've done?
Sure. So you essentially are entered into what we call a circle. So a circle is the people within a certain project and the budget that you're trying to allocate. So in the case of Yearn, they give out about 2 YFI tokens, 2 YFI, every month to their contributor circle. And so over the course of that month, that's what we call an epoch. So an epoch is just whatever length of time you're reviewing. Contributors in that circle get 100 give. And these give are essentially, you can think of them as like poker chips, right? They're yours, and the total number of give equals the total amount of budget trying to be distributed. And so you look through the different contributors, you put them on to your team so that you can directly reward those folks who you saw or experienced somehow. You can speak to the value that they added, right? So one of the ideas behind Coordinape is we really lean into this subjective opinion of everyone in the circle to say, here's who I thought added value, and you allocate your give. And then when the epoch is closed, the percentage of give you received, the total percentage of give you received equals the total percentage of whatever budget is being allocated. So people use this to allocate, both stable coins and, their native token to their communities.
Okay, thanks for that. One question that I have in mind, because I was playing around with Coordinape before we organized this episode, that I was wondering, like, do you have any problems with groups of people that just want to exploit somehow the fact that it's subjective, or because DAOs are so transparent, it's even if this kind of people arrive to the DAO, they are very quickly kicked out or something?
Yeah, I would say a couple things, and Tracheopteryx speaks about this really eloquently, about how we're used to sort of, the base layer of blockchains being very hyper vigilant about attack vectors, right? And that trustlessness is super important. But when you get into this layer of DAOs and collaborators, it's actually has a lot more trust built into it. It's very rare that people are going to show up into a DAO and actually achieve the level of contribution where they get invited into or vouched into a Coordinape circle, and then go through the trouble of trying to, collude or somehow cheat the system. By the time you're there and actually doing things that get you entry into a circle, it's probably because you somehow believe in the DAO and are looking to really make an impact. The other thing is that because of the way that Coordinape works, so if you go on and use it, you'll see that the results of each epoch are displayed in a map. so you can see each contributor and who they gave to and who gave to them. And so, if you're doing some blatant, collusion where if you're doing a blatant, you give to me, I give to you, and we'll give all of our give, it'll be really obvious in that map. And it also destroys essentially your capital, your social capital, for very little upside. There's not that many protocols that are giving out millions of dollars each epoch. And so it's worth it to burn all your bridges for one slightly more gain 1 month. So we really haven't seen it be an issue. It's interesting to me that that's always kind of one question that people ask right away. It's like, well, how are people exploiting it, or can they? It's like, well, you can kind of, but there's really no upside for doing it, and we haven't seen it be a problem so far.
So from what I'm hearing is that like you use kind of proof of work as a way to secure, this token in a way that you need to do a lot of work to actually be invited to the circle.
Or at least do something, right? There's very few protocols that are just opening their Coordinape circle to anyone in the Discord, right? Generally, you get added to a circle because there's someone that wants to reward you for something. And so in that way, it's very retrospective. It's sort of like looking at what people have done. And, I feel like that's actually a good way for DAOs to grow, because for people to show up, and obviously there's a ton of conversation about onboarding, and, people show up in the Discord and say like, how can I help? What do I do? And that's one of the biggest hurdles is finding niches for people to reliably contribute. And we need to do a better job of onboarding and sort of creating a clear path for folks. But also DAOs are a fundamentally more ambiguous, more organic, less mechanistic way of collaborating and working. And so a certain tolerance for self-starting and ambiguity and just trying something and seeing how it lands or where it lands is super valuable. And so having people that are willing to do something and then get rewarded for it is super valuable in DAOs. While also noting that, that's a huge privilege to be able to do work without getting immediately compensated for it. So, it's a complex issue for sure. I don't mean to downplay that, but it really does help to have a system to say, if you do the work, you get rewarded, as opposed to a bounty type system.
That's an interesting thing that you've said, that DAOs somehow filter out people who are more self-starters, as if it was filtering out for more entrepreneurial people. Because like when you're an entrepreneur, that's exactly what you do. You do stuff, but you might not get rewarded whatsoever. But you do it because you believe it's valuable and useful for the world around you, at least like in the best ways. Some people just do it for rewards, but yeah.
Just want to emphasize, this is a very both and not a binary thing. You want, obviously, doers and people that can take a task and execute it. Bounties are an extremely valuable tool for DAOs. And so is creating this entrepreneurial culture where it's kind of like you do and then are rewarded versus, well, how much am I going to get by doing this? The two, really both are critical, I think.
Okay. And, I know that you're kind of like a child of fear and finance. I don't know if it's the right word, but this is like a big DAO to work with from the start. And how have you acquired other big names? Because I know Forefront and Bankless also use Coordinape for their everyday work.
I mean, I think it was just a tool that addressed a really common pain point for every DAO. Right? Every DAO has this issue of people coming and contributing and wanting to reward them and not wanting that rewarding to be a centralized process. And so, while Coordinape is certainly far from perfect and we're excited about all the different ways it can be improved, it did address this kind of core pain point that a lot of DAOs have encountered, which is we have contributors that aren't necessarily ready to come, be full-time and take a salary, but are adding a ton of value, and we want a way to reward and thank them. And, Coordinape can also be a really powerful cultural tool of recognition and building a gratitude culture. And so I think because we had those two things at a time, as you alluded to earlier, when DAOs were kind of really exploding and people were seeing the opportunity, we were at the kind of right place, right time with something that addressed that specific niche need.
Okay, and because you're in this like Web3 version of B2B, like DAO to DAO business.
Hmm.
So I'm wondering, like, if I am a big DAO and I contact you and I say, okay, Coordinape is cool, like, how can I learn more? Do you do like demos, or do you have any process just like normal B2B companies, or is it different in this space?
Uh, Not really. I do a whole lot of demos, AMAs, walking communities through how to think about Coordinate. No, I think in that way, it's very similar. Now we used to have, when we first started, circles weren't permissionless, so you could only start a circle after you sort of contacted us and got it going. Now circles are permissionless; anyone can go start one anytime. But we encourage people to reach out. I'm always happy and always available to come do, kind of an onboarding AMA with any community that wants to use it, because it does really help sync things up and help a community understand, like, what is this, how to use it. But yeah, you don't need to. You can also, we have some videos up on how to. We have our docs, and you can go start a circle anytime.
Okay, cool. So what has been the biggest growth challenges for you so far? Because you've already grown pretty big. Wondering, like, what have you tackled on the way to get here?
I think everyone building in this space, limited dev bandwidth. Finding developers is hard. Finding good ones that you vibe with, really hard. And then, helping them sort of decide on what to prioritize and what to work on. Speaking for myself, is always the least technical person in every conversation. I feel like devs are wizards. I don't understand how they do it, but I sure appreciate it. So just bandwidth, has been difficult. The speed at which things move, seeing all the different potential for collaboration, thinking about what do we build ourselves versus what do we collaborate on, what do we build on top of, all of these things. There's 1,000 priorities of things that need doing. And so how do you just prioritize has been a huge challenge. I think responding to, the flood of feature requests that come with a flood of new users, they're all good. And, with a small dev team, just trying to sort of line up what are the priorities one at a time. Those things have all been challenges. And honestly, also recognizing that Coordinape has the potential to really facilitate some powerful conversations among teams, and trying to figure out ways to do that in asynchronous ways is also, I feel like, a big challenge for us. It's really powerful to see these results of a circle, but something we definitely learned in Converge, and I think people are learning with Coordinape, is that conversations that come out of these results are much more powerful than the results themselves. If you have a chance to, as a team, look at the results of this map and these allocations and start saying, well, what do we value, based on what we're allocating here? Are we valuing each team member to say thanks? Or are we actually just going purely on, the value that they've contributed to the protocol? What do we do when someone feels like they're not being adequately compensated? How does someone put up their hand and let everyone know what they've been working on? These feedback loops are incredibly critical, and trying to find more and more innovative and asynchronous ways to help protocols have those conversations is also a challenge, just given that everyone has, limited amount of time and brain power to be at their screen.
Yeah, it's really fascinating that, you just by using one tool, you can transform the whole culture in a company, like a company or a DAO, whatever. But,
Mm-hmm.
just one, it's like, this one rock that is just like creating this avalanche, but an avalanche of a good thing, because avalanche of
Mm-hmm.
transparency, as far as I understand. And sometimes it can be hard for people because, how to say, okay, I think I should be rewarded more tokens because I think it was more important than something. Like, this is a hard conversation to have. But if you don't have these kind of
Mm-hmm.
conversations, you get, like, instead of getting technical debt, you get this kind of, relational debt that you are going to pay one day. So I think it's super powerful. I also read one story of Y Academy that used Coordinape to replace grades for students. So, students were given tokens and they had
Mm.
to just share them among the group. And this is actually a nice solution for this, kind of like like a very popular problem in group projects where you have one person on college that does all the work and everyone is just free riding on them. So I see that like it has bigger potential than you might see from the outside. And I'm wondering, like, do you have any ideas or thoughts about long-term impact of Coordinape that you could have?
I mean, yeah, that's our whole motivation in starting it. Really, it goes much beyond compensation and distributing. Really, it does go to this concept you talked about of helping us to invent a new way to collaborate. And really, how can our work also contribute to our own personal growth? Like, how can our work contribute to actually upgrading systems for coordination and collaboration? My personal motivation for working on this is actually, most of my career, I come from the sustainability space and working with corporations around sustainability strategy. And, we're entering the teeth of the Anthropocene, and solving some really intense, wicked global challenges from ecological collapse, food insecurity. The list goes on. Everyone, is aware of all these massive systemic problems that are really, I think Kevin Owocki and the Gitcoin folks and their memes around slaying Moloch and the greatest LARP are right on. The whole point of this Web3 technology is really how are we going to get a lot better at mass collaboration and coordination. And so, using tools like Coordinape, ideally, as we improve it, and they facilitate more of these conversations about what are my gifts to give? How can I add value to a project? And what is it that I can bring that's appreciated by people? If we have a tool that helps you find and discover that, there's huge implications for it, right? It really increases the level of trust needed. And, if you have enough trust, the point of trust is so that you can engage in conflict. And so I can have the hard conversation to say, I know you worked for 10 hours on this video, but it's not good. And so, I'm not going to give you as many give as this other person because this didn't add value, but here's the way it could be better. That's the whole point of building trust, is so that you can have these hard conversations and stay in relationship through them. So, there's a lot of ways that I feel like tools like Coordinape and obviously there's a lot of other awesome stuff being built in the space can really contribute to much higher functioning collaborations at scale of the kind that we're going to need when we really want to start tackling some of these serious problems. Allocating tokens is an important problem. Solving regional food security is an even more pressing problem.
Yeah, I see that because, I was thinking before our recording about using this kind of tool in like a classic company. Obviously, they want to use it because of other reasons, but like imagine using it in a classic corporation. And the thing that it changes is the focus on the output, like, the real value you provide instead of inputs that when you get bigger, when a company gets bigger and you might get snowed under the processes and procedures, it's very easy to focus on the inputs and just forget about the value that we want to create. So I think, especially for bigger organization, and bankless is a pretty big thing. Like I was watching some interviews and I've heard that they've used Coordinape to coordinate 300 people at once. So this is like a medium-sized company. So yeah, like I think especially for the bigger entities, it might be super powerful.
Yeah, and I think they will continue to iterate and understand how exactly to use this tool. I've seen some really big circles. Sometimes those can make sense for real broad community contribution circles. Other folks have circles that have 6, 7, 8 people in them, where there's a lot of shared context and a lot of trust. So it becomes a really powerful conversation each time there's an allocation. I think that one of our goals with Coordinape is to create a tool that's highly customizable, so that for all these different use cases, eventually we'll have features that you can turn on and turn off to really customize it to fit the specific instance that you're using. But yeah, ultimately, the goal is that compensation is decentralized and there's no one saying, here's how much you're going to get. It's really always based on what's the value you're providing? And there's obviously a million ways to interpret that question, and we'll leave it up to every DAO to do it.
Mm. It's this funny reflection that I have that, Web3 is kind of low key disrupting the whole collaboration and governance, ways that we've used for the last like hundreds of years. And the way it's low key because it just happens on the way. DAOs wants to make something done and they ask Coordinape, for example, to help. And I really like the fact that it kind of happens in the background. It feels so natural that it's goal oriented. I would like to ask you about the communities because you work with other DAOs. So it's a different community than people have when they do an NFT drop or, they want to pump coin to the moon. There's different people, different goals and so on. So I'm wondering, how do you take care of this kind of community? Is there anything specific that you need to have in mind when working with other DAOs compared to, more, I might say, B2C communities?
I'm not sure. What really attracts me to the space is the vibes. I feel like a lot of the DAOs that we work with building something because they see the potential of Web3 to really be transformational. One of the things that I struggle with, and I know a lot of people do, is we sort of are super optimistic and excited and don't want to sound, naive or Pollyanna when we talk about, Web3 is going to change the world. But if it's not going to, then what are we even doing here? And, we're sort of at that stage of the game, in my opinion, where, if we're not looking at ways to really transform the way that we collaborate systemically, then, we're in for a certain kind of future. Mm-hmm. And so I've been totally excited, and I think a lot of people are, by just the energy of builders in the Web3 space. And it's interesting to me looking at sort of the conversations of crypto more broadly in the culture, criticizing sort of the casino nature of a lot of it, which is obviously a big part of the culture too. But I think what's emerging in this Web3 and DAO space is really special. And it's important that we sort of lean into that naive optimism and say, no, we actually can pull this off. When we say WAGMI, we're all going to make it. I think it can be taken as like, oh, we're all gonna strike it rich one day, but it actually is literally like we're all going to make it. We're going to build this thing together. And I think it's a really also a powerful movement in the sense that we have the chance to actually, build a better system. Taking Buckminster's Fuller's quote, you don't fight the old system, you just build a new one that makes the old one obsolete. And after all my years, I was an Earth First Forest activist, in college fighting against the logging companies. And then I was a sustainability activist, fighting against these evil corporation or this thing, and always sort of fighting against the status quo. And now it feels like, no, we can just go build this new system. We can create things and we don't have to convince anybody. They'll just come. So it's just right now, the vibes and sort of the shared values and worldview of a lot of these companies, or I should say communities that we're connecting with. I think it's awesome. It's really inspiring.
Okay. So the thing that connects you with other DAOs and makes you trustworthy partner is that you have similar attitude, like this kind of positively ambitious worldview. And
yeah, I think that we all we see the potential of, DAOs hold the promise right now of collaborating and coordinating in a whole different way. And I think the more we're in them, we also see all the challenges, right? But all of these communities are essentially running experiments in how can we collaborate and coordinate across all kinds of difference. How can we do it better? And so, regardless of what their own individual missions are, they're all important experiments in upgrading our collaboration capacity. And so in that sense, it does feel like we all have a real shared value. And that's why I think it's powerful that it's happening right now, in places like DeFi, where there's real monetary incentive to be doing these kind of collaborations. But already, we see so many examples of people turning the power of DAOs into looking at conservation, into looking at impacting real world problems and issues. And I think we're going to see that more and more. And so our responsibility is to make sure that DAOs are actually functionally up to the task
Yeah.
of competing and delivering.
I'm wondering, does it somehow manifest in specific actions that you take as a DAO? I mean, for example, like Madhavan from Questbook, he has, like, his co-founder does an introductory call every day for people that join their Discord channel so they can feel at home. And they do it every day, like, the same time for the last, I don't know, few months. And they feel like one of the biggest Web3 developers community in the space. So, by the way, I can connect you to, maybe you can find developers there. But
Fantastic.
but I'm wondering, do you have any specific things that you do to build this connection with community? Maybe you have some specific channel on Discord, maybe you do something on your Twitter, or you organize some kind of regular Ask Me Anything sessions or anything like that.
I think we're still really learning how to build community around Coordinape. There's folks on our team who are doing an awesome job sort of cultivating our dev community. All of our sort of core devs are really great at that. I think, if we were ever to have a token, that certainly helps a lot. I think it's a critical pillar of community building because there has to be some way to, reward and align incentives with people who are coming to help out. And that's something we want to get increasingly good at. I think it's also a unique challenge in building a product. A community built product is something we haven't seen a lot of examples of. Or I should just speak for myself. I haven't seen a lot of examples of sort of the mental model that I notice I get stuck in a lot. And when you look at great products, there's often, visionaries behind them that really hold this vision consistently. Have we seen great products come out of large scale collaboration? So how to cultivate a community while also, delivering something that is immediately useful and functional to folks is a really interesting, problem for us to continue to solve. We certainly are on the path to and fully intend to be a DAO ourselves. And, my hope is that structure allows kind of 1,000 flowers to bloom and all sorts of people to come build and iterate and collaborate on what Coordinape can be. We're kind of betting that if we can effectively find ways to harness collective intelligence, it's better than that single visionary leader. But I imagine it'll probably be a bit of a both and there. But certainly early in our community building journey, and welcome anyone who's excited about that aspect of things to come help out and be a part of it.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, I think it makes, a lot of sense to be also like careful about building community-led products, because as you said, like, if you build a normal product, you have like 200 books on Amazon, like all of them are 4.5 stars at least, average reviews, and you can learn so much. But this is like, maybe it has happened. I bet that, like, if you open Harvard Business Review, there might be some cases, but I don't think there are many of them. So, like, Web3 is still in this trailblazing mode. And the thing that you said, like, one of the best things to build a community is to bring them useful product. And I think that's your way, actually, because, like, if you have many people using your product, community builds itself, sort of. Like, obviously you need to nurture it, but at least they have something to crystallize around. They don't crystallize around token, they crystallize around product, which is, I think, even cooler maybe in some ways.
Yeah, and that's our hope, is that people who are excited and see the potential for all the different ways that Coordinape can go are excited to come help us get it there, because there's sort of endless features and potentials, all the things that it can do, and especially that it can integrate with. And so just finding the people who are equally jazzed on sort of that vision of it, improving collaboration and cohering collective intelligence, they'll show up.
And I have one of the last questions regarding Coordinape, and this is about the largest technical issues that you have faced, and how have you, solved the problems that you had?
Yeah, maybe with the big disclaimer again that I am the least qualified person to comment on our technical challenges. But I know that one thing that we're thinking a lot about, I don't know if this qualifies as a technical challenge, but thinking about decentralized ID and how that really works. Nobody wants to come on to Coordinape and build a profile, in Coordinape. We all have these disparate profiles everywhere. And I think one of the real powerful opportunities of Coordinape is that in addition to compensation, it can be an incredibly powerful reputation signal, to look at someone and see like, oh, wow, you've got, 10,000 give across 7 different DAOs. They must really understand the DAO landscape and know how to contribute value. How are we going to sort of have that I'm the same person wherever I go and my reputation goes with me? I know there's a lot of people experimenting with this and have, early versions, but I'd love to be able to click on someone in a Coordinape circle and say like, wow, they got a lot of give. I wonder, who is this person? And when I click on them, I see the different DAOs that they're a part of. I see how many give they've received. I also see, the POAPs they choose to display, their GitHub repos. It's kind of like, this decentralized LinkedIn, which I know makes a lot of people barf to hear them say that, but specifically the graph in Coordinape can be such a powerful sense-making tool for DAOs, to understand who is here, who are my fellow contributors, who are the ones that are getting give, and what are they working on, so that I can maybe, help out with it, or where can I find where there's some niches where, my skill set can fit. Who should I reach out to? Like this, it sort of becomes this de facto directory, but having a more robust profile that I'm sure would serve all of the other places where they're also operating, feels like a really powerful opportunity, and a technical challenge for us in sort of how do we integrate who people are outside of Coordinape while they're using Coordinape.
Yeah, it feels as if you can have this like digital resume, but the difference between, this and the normal one is like in normal, you apply for the job and you can lie, and people do it a lot. And maybe some of them even don't lie. They just kind of paint it in the best, colors they can. So they say, oh yeah, like this person on McDonald's that works on the cash, and they say, I manage multi-million-dollar transactions in one of the global companies. And, like Coordinape seems like a non-bullshit way of making this kind of internet profile, because you have this proof of work and proof of value, actually, like even not work, but value that you contributed.
Right.
And yeah, like seems super cool as a starting.
That's the best case scenario, that it does become a proof of value and attestation. There's still a lot of challenges, I think, to overcome there. I don't have to go into all of them because there are many, but that is the ultimate goal, is that Coordinape becomes one of many, but a very powerful reputational metric, because it is sort of unfakeable in terms of like people are rewarding you for the direct value they saw you provide. I mean, I would add just real quick that's, I think, another technical challenge that we're experiencing, and all DAOs is how do I communicate to people all the things that I've worked on, in a way that doesn't end up being just a big make work assignment of now I have to spend an hour writing up all the things I did, but how to get insight into all the different ways that people have added value and just make sense of all the things going on, I think is a big challenge in DAOs too, and, probably a technical one.
Yeah, it would be cool to have, like, for example, you work in Notion and it kind of summarizes all the tasks. And there's like GPT-3 that writes a narrative about it, like this week we've done blah, blah, blah. Obviously, it seems like a very hard thing to do. I don't know even if it's possible, but like it would be super cool to have something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure that through collaborating, we'll find ways to get much more concise and clear ways of communicating all the things that we've done. Some way to kind of roll up our tasks that draws on, calendars and GitHub, all these different things. We're not there yet.
Okay. Zakku, we are getting till the end. So I have 3 more questions that I ask to all my guests. So the first one is, what has been the most mind-blowing Web3 projects that you have seen so far?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, everything is kind of mind blowing in its own way. I'm always going to be a real huge fan of Yearn when you look at what Yearn has been able to accomplish and the culture which with they've done it. For me, Yearn is the more you look under the hood, actually, the more fascinating it is. And they've been able to develop a very unique and multifaceted culture. I recommend everyone check out the Blue Pill, the sort of book slash manifesto that we created to really talk about, how are we thinking about Yearn, but DAOs and the Web3 movement more broadly. So Yearn is mind blowing to me. I'm also a big fan of Kraus
Mm.
House, I think, in the sort of, hairy, audacious goal camp and the community that they've assembled, I'm very confident that are eventually going to pull off their goal of owning an NBA team. But the energy and momentum that they've been able to capture is really mind blowing. I'm also a really big fan of experiments like Cabin, creator cabins and Cabin
Mm.
DAO, looking at how can we facilitate more in real life experiences. I think that every DAO that's around within a couple of years will have a regular cadence of at least twice a year getting together in real life and having these deep dives to build trust and do sense making and shared coherence to then go remote and go continue to build. So I think that project has a lot of cool potential of their vision of bringing DAOs together in real life for experiences. And I'm sure I could list 1,000 more, but there's a few that I think are awesome projects.
Okay. And what was the funniest thing that had happened during your time in the Web3 space? Something that made you laugh or smile?
Uh, well, the first thing that comes it was really early on when a friend had told me about the whole DeFi space, and they were talking about a project for a decentralized
Hmm.
country. This is right when Balaji was also talking about this, and I went onto a Discord, and I was posting some messages and reading things, and this person, Tracheopteryx, was kept writing things. I was like, wow, like totally vibe with this person. Like this is great, and we were having all these conversations. And then it turns out that I'd known and collaborated pretty closely with Trake in a previous life before either of us were in Web3. And the moment when I realized, like, wait, oh, you're Tracheopteryx? Like I've been having this conversations with your alter ego, not knowing that we actually knew each other and had collaborated before. That was pretty funny, recognizing the way that all of this, anon and pseudonon world
Yeah,
works.
well, like sometimes I wonder like how many people I just communicated or announced that I might know them, either from through friends or something. Yeah, that's really
Right.
magical. Okay, thanks a
Hmm.
lot, Zakku, for your time. I have one last question, and it's whom should I invite next? Like, who do you think would be a good fit for this kind of conversation?
Oh wow.
It's a tough one.
I mean, it is uh, everybody.
Yeah,
Um,
I will just tag like
well,
everyone on Discord and just bring them on.
this is, I mean, a bit shameless, but David Ehrlichman, who is actually my co-founder at Converge and just wrote a book called Impact Networks, I think has some tremendous insight that parallels Web3 from all of our work and what we learned working, in the IRL DAO space and how it translates over. I think that could be a really powerful conversation and provide sort of a different perspective that's both, of Web3, but not in it, if that makes sense. And so he would be a great person to talk to.
Okay, and is he anyhow active in this Web3 space as well?
He is currently helping to coordinate a very informal at the moment network of DAO contributors who we're all sort of trying to share learnings and understand better what we're working on. I saw he's doing some different podcasts. He was on Chase Chapman's On the Other Side podcast, and he was also on. Anyway, he's doing AMAs with Index and stuff like that. So he's definitely getting active. Yeah, there's another person, actually, as long as I'm just throwing things out, I'll find them. There's some of the folks that I follow on Twitter who I find really compelling, but I don't necessarily know what they're working on. So selfishly, I would love to
Okay.
learn more about them too. But I'll send you that later
Okay,
on.
okay. I will try to invite them then.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks a lot.
All
Thanks
right.
a lot. Like it was super interesting conversation, and I think it will be very good intro also for people who are not that familiar with DAOs, because we have like painted this very big picture that lets people understand like what's that really about it. Like it's not about buying constitution or about buying an NBA team. Like of course these are the goals, but like the underlying goal is much bigger than that. And I think it's very cool that we have talked about it.
I sure hope that it is. Yeah, I think it's really important that we have a larger story and a larger narrative to fit ourselves in if we're going to be here for the long haul, and if we're really going to do something that we're proud of and that matters.
Okay, so like if it doesn't, I will ask the audio editor to edit in a way that we sound super smart. Like he can, connect different sentences.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll try and we'll try and string it together. Yeah. Oh yeah, this person that the other person I would love for you to talk to is madamcultleader.e.
Okay.
Cult_leader on Twitter. I mean, consistently engaging perspectives, especially around how we can have more diverse voices adding to the movement. So check them out as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
All right,
and
cool.
Like have a good day, Zach.
Hey, Magic, really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. It was fun.
Thank you.
Take care.
Hey.
Bye-bye.